Raise your hand if you've been personally victimized by a bad TikTok book recommendation. I'm reading 3 of TikTok's most hyped books in June, and I'll be giving my honest thoughts. If these books are as good as TikTok says, I'll eat my words, but I've gotten some pretty bad TikTok book recommendations in the past, like really bad. Which is why I was so happy when my first read was not like that. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Jude Duarte was 7 when her parents were murdered right in front of her, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to live in the treacherous land of Elfhame. 10 years later, Jude wants nothing more to do but to belong there. But many of the Fae despise humans. They enslave humans, they mock humans, they don't like her at all. Especially Prince Cardan, the youngest and wickedest son of the High King. To win a place at the court, Jude must defy him and face the consequences. This book is filled with political intrigue, action, and a bit of romance. And let me tell you that the romance is good. It's really good. Like, so good that I'm sure you have heard some of these lines, some of the famous quotes from this book without even knowing what this book was, because that's how I was. I stumbled across these lines and I was like, wait, that's from this book? Okay. Most of all, I hate you because I think of you. Often. It's disgusting and I can't stop. That line. I have heard that line all over the place, and it is so nice to finally put it into a story and like understand the context of that line, which makes it 10 times better. It's chef's kiss. Along those same lines, we get, "Have I told you how hideous you look tonight?" Cardan asks, leaning back in the elaborately carved chair, the warmth of his words turning the question into something like a compliment. "No," I say, glad to be annoyed back to the present. "Tell me." "I can't." And that line is another one that I've heard before, and I'm sure you've heard before, but it's better with the context knowing that Cardan can't lie. Like, his people, he can't lie. He can dance around the truth, but he can't lie. So her saying, "Tell me I look hideous," and him saying, "I can't," I was melting reading that line. It was so good. And those were just some of my favorite Cardan dialogue moments, because when you look at Jude Duarte, one of the most badass, ruthless women in fiction, she has a lot of killer lines too that make me want to take all of my annotating tabs and go pop, pop, pop. This is now twice as thick because I've just marked up everything Jude Duarte has said ever. If I cannot be better than them, I will be so much worse. Which, in the context of being this powerless girl in this land of magical creatures who have all this status and power over her, for her to just, "You've treated me terrible my whole life. You've bullied me. I've been looked down upon. I've been mocked. I've been physically injured by you people because you just think you're better than me." To say, "I'm gonna take a step down and be worse than you so I can come out on top." We love Jude. She is an icon. "Father, I am what you've made me. I've become your daughter after all." Which is one of the coldest lines in the whole book. Makes Jude Duarte as a character go up to like S tier as she's taking down the man who killed her parents, telling him, "Oh, yeah, I'm the way you made me. You trained me this way. Like, I love you as a stepfather somehow, even though you killed my real parents. But also you've turned me into a killer. You've turned me into this ruthless person who's hungry for power." Which makes one of the most unlikable characters in the whole book, in my opinion, Locke. I don't, if you like Locke, please let me know, because I don't know anyone who likes Locke. Makes him really relatable for a moment, because I want to see how her story unfolds. And he is this just chaotic person who wants to see these stories of people unfold, no matter how tragic, no matter how messed up. I'm gonna quote him real quick, "Because you're like a story that hasn't happened yet, because I want to see what you will do. I want to be part of the unfolding of the tale." And it almost makes me feel guilty disliking Locke, because I feel the same way about following Jude's story. Like, it's a scary story. It's a messed up story. She has to go through a lot of trials and tribulations, but I am very much, and have been, moving through this book, foaming at the mouth to figure out what the heck happens next in this series. But I actually didn't feel that way the entirety of the story. It was a slower build for me. There were a lot of later scenes that actually made me really fall in love with the characters and the story itself. And I'm gonna say it because I know that everyone who's read this book thinks back to this series of scenes and thinks, wow, that is probably one of the coolest things in fiction. maybe not one of the coolest, but it's definitely is one of my favorite moments that I've ever read in fiction. In terms of Jude having Cardan as her hostage. And it was such a big turnaround for me because I have never in my life disliked a character and switched up on him as much as I have Cardan. Because I remember posting, and you've probably, if you follow my Snap story, my Instagram story, you've seen me. I've been posting. How do people like Cardan so much? I hate this guy. He's bullying Jude, like the heck out of Jude. He's so cruel, which is called the Cruel Prince. Of course he's cruel. But I was so annoyed with Cardan. I thought he was just an annoying, useless prince that had like no depth to him whatsoever. Cardan being Jude's hostage, we finally get the romance that was teased before I even opened this book. We get to see Cardan's charisma in showing how he woos over the Court of Shadows. He gets them to release him to play cards with them. He gets them to teach him how to do parlor tricks and be a thief. It's really interesting because he goes from this really hated character to just like really charismatic all of a sudden, and you see why other people in Elfhame gravitate towards him, despite him being the cruel, wicked prince that he is. And it leads up to one of my favorite scenes in almost any book I've ever read. It's definitely up there. The drinking scene between Madoc and Jude. Because the whole story, Jude's building up this poison tolerance, and there's not much mention of it, there's not much payoff. It's just like little insertions here and there. She's like, yeah, I'm taking this poison, so, you know, it's gonna help me build this tolerance, and it's really gonna, as a human, I'm not gonna be able to be controlled as easily. I'm not going to be able to be like poisoned by just like little bits of poison slipped into my drink. I was confused where it was going. I was like, when are we going to see this payoff? Because it was mentioned so early in the book, and this scene wasn't until like very end of the book, where we see not her using it against the royal family, not her using it against Cardan, who was her big rival at the beginning of the book, against her own father, her stepfather, who killed her real parents. But when Madoc goes, how did you know which glass I would choose? And she says, I didn't, I poisoned both. It was such a aha moment in my head that it was just like, you get a hint so early in the book, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting for the payoff. You get to the very end, you get that payoff. One of my favorite scenes in fiction, which obviously it's not the first time anyone's done it. The I poisoned both has been done by many people before, but it's definitely my favorite execution of that trope that I've ever seen. And the fact that she could take down her stepfather, who, you know, killed her parents, nice little bit of revenge there at the end of the book. Now, it'd be criminal of me to move on without mentioning the crown switch real quick, because I thought that ending part of the book was amazing. I really liked it. It was predictable in the sense that, you know, I think most of the readers at that point were like, okay, so the most obvious option is for her to give the crown to Cardan, right? Because Oak's a baby, she doesn't want Madoc to have control. Obviously, Baelken would be a terrible ruler. We don't want him as ruler. He just murdered a bunch of people. Goodbye. So it was obvious, but it was a really nice payoff because we get to see that switch and Cardan go off because he's starting to warm up to Jude after like this, you know, we feel like he hates her this whole book, starting to warm up to her after getting kidnapped by her and scheming with her. I'd argue that the trick on Cardan to make him the High King isn't necessarily the most entertaining and like most groundbreaking part of this scene. I think the interesting part, to me at least, is seeing Cardan switching once again back to disliking Jude because he starts to grow fond of her. You see he has some emotional attachment to her. They kiss, they, you know, had their romantic moment. He went from like hate to love. We got our enemies to lovers really briefly, and then because of this last action of Jude just outsmarting everyone, including him, who they were supposed to be working together, she outsmarts him. He goes back to hating her because he didn't want this responsibility of being High King. I just found that so fun to read. Overall, I'll say if you can grit your teeth to the bullies aspect, to bullies to lovers, and endure the lengthy build-up, the payoff, so worth it. I absolutely loved it, and the reason I gave it 4 stars is because I couldn't put the second half of the book down. Unlike book 2. Powerful by Lauren Roberts. And before you come to my door with torches and pitchforks, I really did love Powerless. It was one of my favorite reads this past year, and I'm very much excited for Reckless. I could not get a copy of that book soon enough. I have been asking around, trying to, but Powerful for me just didn't quite do it. And let me tell you why. Powerful is a novella that just released about Adina, Peyton's childhood friend. Fate brought them together when they were young, but friendship ensured that they would always protect each other in the home they built in the slums of Loot Alley. But now Peyton, an ordinary, has been selected for the Purging Trials, which means almost certain death, which we saw from her perspective in Powerless. Phenomenal book. Do recommend. Now, alone in Loot, Adina must fend for herself. After she attempts to steal, a mysterious man from the market comes to her rescue. Mac's shadowy past and secretive power set him apart from the other low-level elites of Loot. And as the pair team up to see their loved ones before the trials, the quest tests their loyalty, their love, and their lives. Now, there were a lot of cute moments in this book. There were a lot of very cute moments in this book. We get lines like, "You make even the stars envious," I repeat softly, leaning toward her, "because one day, far from now, you will be up there beside them, outshining every single one." As you can see, I annotated this book, and that line got many highlights from me. All of the highlights from me. I had never known happiness before her, but if there is an after in which she doesn't exist, I know I never will again. This line hit so hard, like a freight train. I was reading this on a plane, and I felt like a train came through the plane, trucked me out of the plane, and I crashed to the ground, and my head hit the floor like 10,000 feet below. Because we know what's gonna happen. Everyone reading this book has read Powerless. I don't know why you would read this one first. But if you read Powerless, you know Adina's, yeah. And it's just really sad seeing the build up to this, because this man who hasn't opened up to anyone else since his childhood, this man who is very like a broken person, and he's finally getting put together by this sunshine character that is Adina, is about to have that all stripped away from him. And it's heartbreaking to watch. And those are lines from the grumpy character, because this book is very much sunshine character and grumpy character fall in love. That is like, I've never seen a book more so sunshine character and grumpy character. Because Adina is literally a ball of sun, and this man has like no friends. He's a lonely fellow that's very broken. But we get some really cute lines from Adina as well. I've just been talking about Mac's lines, but if I jump to Adina's favorite line of mine, and I annotated so I have lots of tabs on this line as well. "He makes me happy for whatever absurdly odd reason. He's not exactly a ray of sunshine, but perhaps something equivalent to moonlight. Mysterious and unnerving. Equally as beautiful, yet soft enough to stare at." There we go. We get the comparison of the sun and the moon in them, which is really beautiful. And I think it's really fitting too, because really their character dynamics just night and day. Granted, there are a lot of cliches in this book, but one cliche that I am always happy to see, and I love seeing in this book, was when Adina comes running and crying because some scummy, slimy men were harassing her. And we get to see Mac, we get to see this grumpy character who really hasn't cared about too many people aside from Hera to this point in his life, get angry. And he's always a little bit mad, he's always a little bit angry, but he gets angry because someone messed with Adina. We get the line, "I didn't know what to do," from Adina, and Mac responds, "You did the right thing. Run to me. Always run to me." I really do eat this trope up every time. Then after calming her down and making sure she's alright, he goes hunting for the men that made her cry. And I won't spoil this part, but you'll find out what he did to them later. And it almost reminds me a bit of Kai, which, speaking of, every scene with Kai and Adina in this book, which there aren't too many, but the little that we get is probably some of my favorite scenes in the book. Perfection. Yeah, even more than Peyton, I'd say Kai was my favorite character in Powerless. So getting scenes with him interacting with Peyton's best friend, his crush's best friend, and asking for like dating advice from Adina in the few interactions that we got from them. I needed that. I didn't know I needed that, but I needed that. Now this last little chunk right here, you see this little chunk? We love that. We love this last little chunk. And let me tell you why this last little chunk is a favorite amongst some people. And I'd say it's because we see a lot of happy endings in fiction, right? The majority of books that you read have some kind of like, at least when it comes to the romantic couple, there's very much like a happy resolution, ties things together. It's like, oh, they're really cute. They can ride into the sunset now. Yeah, we knew that wasn't gonna happen with this book. If you've read Powerless, you know Adina's destiny. So setting up this romance with Mac, it was destined to end tragically. And when books can make the bold decision to do that, I eat it up. I really do love it. So it was phenomenal. Mac's realization of who was in the center of the arena, and then having to watch the love of his life die at the end of this book, which again, knew that was coming because if you read Powerless, which you should have before this, you know what's coming. You see him lose the love of his life after he just lost the only other person that he ever cared about less than 2 weeks prior. This grumpy man who just found light again in his really dark, messed up life, lost that light, lost everything. And really seeing it from this different perspective of a lover is heartbreaking because we already saw it from a best friend's perspective. We saw it in Peyton's perspective, we saw it from Kai's perspective, but now we're seeing it not only in first person from Adina, but we're also seeing it from Mac, who saw her as his hope, his light, his future, and that was tear-jerking. But despite that, I'm only giving this 3 stars. It's not because of the length, which that's been an issue on social media. Apparently, a lot of people have been saying that they are not happy with the length of this novella, which that's just what it is. It's a story about a side character in this universe where the protagonists are already set, they already have their own book, and of course that book's going to be longer. Of course, this isn't the main story. This is a side quest. This is a side story, which again, beautiful, important to the universe, but I think any longer and it would have been dragged out. I'm giving it 3 stars because I personally never got super connected with the main characters of this novel. I loved Kai and Peyton from Powerless, but the 2 main characters in this story I really didn't care too much about. Unlike my final read for the month, which might be one of my favorite books of all time, The Wicked King by Holly Black. Yes, this is book 2 to the Cruel Prince series. And there were a number of reasons why I like this one better than book 1. The Wicked King takes place 6 months after the events of book 1, which led with Jude having more power than she ever imagined. But the clock is ticking, and in order to secure her future for her brother, Oak, she must figure out how to get Cardan back on her side, because she only has a year, approximately, of control over him in the kingdom. Everyone is still vying for the crown, and Jude must learn to balance protecting the High King from various outside threats to his rule and inside ones. In this book, really, even more so, I started to see why Cardan is so liked by readers of this series, which incredible because I started this series hating Cardan. I really did. By the end of book 1, I thought he was very entertaining, and by book 2, I'm like, wow, he's my favorite character. How did that happen? He went from least favorite to favorite just like that. And maybe it's because he has a lot of killer dialogue in this book. We get the iconic "kiss me again." He says, "Drunk and foolish, kiss me until I am sick of it." We even get cool quotes about Cardan. Kill him before he makes you love him. And I really didn't think the dynamics between Jude and Cardan could get any more interesting. I didn't think they could get any deeper. I didn't think they could get more dynamic than they were in book 1. But they continued to do so. I wasn't kind to you, Jude. Not to many people. Not to you. I wasn't sure if I wanted you or if I wanted you gone from my sight so that I would stop feeling as I did, which made me even more unkind. But when you were gone, truly gone beneath the waves, I hated myself as I never have before. This book just hits a nerve for enemies to lovers that I feel like is so rare to hit. Because a lot of enemies to lovers books, you don't get true enemies to true lovers. You don't get as messed up as a dynamic as these two are. Jude and Cardan are a catastrophe, a disaster, apart together. It's all a mess, and it's so entertaining. If he thought I was bad, I would be worse. If he thought I was cruel, I would be horrifying. Which that's an interesting compliment onto a line that Jude says in the first book. I already quoted her on this, but I'm going to scroll back up so I can say it again. Jude says, "If I cannot be better than them, I will become so much worse." And then we get Cardan again saying, "If he thought I was bad, I would be worse." That complements what Jude said in book 1 so well, and it's such an iconic line that it's really cool to see Cardan just saying it to Jude in book 2. And not only was I taken aback by lines like that, but the undersea scene. I have to talk about the undersea scene because I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. Jude being kidnapped and taken to the undersea was such a blind side for me. This whole sequence of her being tortured and then pretending like she couldn't be controlled because of the gesh that Dane put on her in book 1 with Balekin now, so unexpected, I could not put the book down. I was in an airport reading this, and I kid you not, my plane lands, I get to this scene, and I'm like, I cannot put this book down. I'm carrying my carry-on, I'm trying to read and walk. I'm walking through the airport to my baggage claim, and I'm still reading and walking. I could not put it down. Not to even mention the traitor being from the Court of Shadows. The ghost did one over on me. Not just Jude, Not just the Court of Shadows. The ghost did one over on me, the reader. I'm not angry at the ghost. I'm just disappointed. I'm shocked. I'm not thrilled. But you know who does make me angry? Because there is someone in this book who actually makes me very angry, and it's Vivienne. We finally get to see more of her and her girlfriend Heather living in the human world with Oak, but there's the big issue of, oh, Vivienne, you haven't told your girlfriend that you're actually not human? You haven't told her that your family's not human and that your parents, you know, were murdered by your now stepfather and that your sisters live in a magical land? Strange. No, what made me mad and also made Jude mad, you could see her, she was very upset with her sister in this sequence of scenes, and even the rest of the book, she was upset with her sister. Vivienne springs on Heather that she's not human all of a sudden. She springs, oh, I'm not from this world. And the event that we're going to right now, telling you about right now, it's not a human event. You will be one of the only humans there in a land of Fae who despise humans, where your life is going to be in danger when I take you here. And naturally what happens is Heather is taken advantage of by a magic user who gives her cat-like features, mocks her, takes away her speech, and she's freaking out now because had no idea this was a thing a day ago, and now she's under the control of a magic creature because her girlfriend didn't prepare her to stay safe in a very dangerous land. And Jude very much voices this frustration, right? Because Jude understands. Jude's human. Taryn's human. Her stepsister, Vivienne, her older sister, is not human. And she just doesn't get it. And even though we got some beautiful moments of connection between Jude and Heather, just connecting over how they're human, Vivienne really went down on my character tier list. We are not a fan of Vivienne anymore. Going back to characters I love, Cardan making Jude queen, expect it. I figured that was going to happen. I feel like most people knew that was going to happen. And then exiling her, that was the perfect way to end book 2. It was phenomenal because it showed this little bit of deceit and like wittiness on Cardan's part, which we didn't necessarily know was there because he's always portraying himself as like lazy, and I think he is very much lazy to some extent, but he's definitely cunning and he's definitely smarter than he wants people to know. I just thought that was a phenomenal way to end the book, and it sets up a really interesting picture for book 3. We've got Jude stuck in the human world because she's exiled until she's excused by the crown, but she's also the Queen of Fairy, and the only person who knows is Cardan, because she tried to tell everyone. She tried to tell everyone after the whole undersea incident, I'm the Queen of Fairy. Everyone laughed. Everyone thinks it's so humorous that a mortal could be crowned the Queen of Fairy, when in all reality, just earlier Cardan crowned her the Queen of Fairy. There's so much more in this book that I could talk about, but this just was a 5-star read for me, and I'm very generous with my ratings, so don't get mad at me too much. But I just enjoyed reading this so much. The struggle for someone to maintain power as someone on a deadline who has never had power in their life, they were on the bottom of the social ladder, what just made for an impossible read to put down. And I'm officially eating my words, a 4, 3, and 5-star book recommended from TikTok. Next, I'm going to be reading the internet's most popular manga series in one day. Let's see if it's worth the read.